I never expected to wake up as the most hated villain in a trashy romance novel. A system is forcing me to bully the female lead, or it'll punish me with electric shocks. But can someone please tell me why the more pathetic I am, the weirder the seemingly fragile Crystal Vance looks at me? Now she's got me locked in a mansion, trembling as she holds a picture she took of me. Who the hell is running this story? You know, I never thought my life would end this way. I was a certified 21st century couch potato. My most strenuous daily activity was rolling over in bed. But on one perfectly sunny afternoon, I choked on a bite of cup of noodles, and just like that, I was gone, and then, here, if you're going to reincarnate someone, at least give them a decent role. But no, I had to wake up inside some billionaire romance novel I'd skimmed once, as the character everyone loves to hate, the one with the most miserable ending imaginable, Ethan Hayes. This Ethan character came from a family with a little bit of money, a spoiled brat who was obsessed with the male lead. His entire purpose in the story was to bully and humiliate the female lead, Crystal Vance, just to make the hero look even more heroic and devoted. In the original book, this guy ends up bankrupt, his legs broken by the hero who'd gone full dark side. He's left to beg on the streets and dies without anyone even bothering to claim his body. Just thinking about it sends a chill down my spine. As I was trying to process this grim new reality, a sharp ding echoed in my head. Vicious supporting character system successfully bound. Host, Ethan Hayes. Please execute the beginner mission immediately. Slap the female lead, Crystal Vance, across the face and verbally humiliate her. Mission failure will result in electric shock punishment. I just stared into space. Electric shock? I'm scared of static cling. What kind of sadist designed this system? Can I not do it? I asked weakly in my mind. Mission countdown, 10, 9, 8. The cold, synthetic voice was devoid of any emotion. I felt my scalp tingle. Electric shock would just zap my newly arrived fragile soul right out of existence. 3, 2, I'll do it. I'll do it. I practically screamed it in my head, tears welling up. I'm a coward. Forget dying a horrible death later. I couldn't even handle the threat of getting zapped right now. I looked around. I was in an absurdly luxurious bedroom, at least 10 times the size of my old studio apartment. A plush king-size bed with velvet curtains, a thick, pure white wool carpet that just screamed money covering the floor. And standing beside the bed was a girl in a simple white dress. That had to be her, Crystal Vance. Her skin was like snow, her features delicate as a painting. Long, black hair cascaded down her waist. She looked fragile and beautiful, like a porcelain doll that could shatter at any moment. Right now, her head was bowed, her shoulders trembling slightly, the very picture of a wronged heroine. My hands shaking, I walked towards her, my heart pounding like a drum against my ribs. Hitting a woman? Hitting the beautiful main character of the story? This was just wrong. But the system in my head was humming, an unspoken thread of high voltage buzzing in my ears. I raised my arm. It felt like it was filled with lead. Crystal seemed to sense my movement and looked up. Her clear eyes held a flicker of fear and something else, a trace of curiosity I couldn't quite place. I squeezed my eyes shut, steeled myself, and swung my hand. It was less of a slap and more of a clumsy pat, my palm just grazing her cheek. I doubt it would have been enough to kill a mosquito. You, I stammered, trying to come up with the required verbal humiliation. I struggled for a solid 10 seconds, my face turning red from the effort before I finally managed to squeak out, "You stay away from him." The words had all the impact of a wet noodle. Sure enough, a warning siren blared in my mind. Warning, host's mission completion rate is below 30%. Initiating level 1 electric shock punishment. Wait, I yelled, scared out of my wits. My eyes darted from Crystal's pale, almost translucent cheek to the pristine white carpet at her feet. In a flash of inspiration, I blurted out, "You get on the bed and kneel." Crystal froze, a flicker of shock in her beautiful eyes. I pointed at the carpet, my voice filled with genuine, heartfelt pain. "This carpet is a limited edition. You think you can afford to replace it if you get it dirty? If you're gonna kneel, do it on the bed. Don't ruin my stuff." The little man in my head was screaming, "Do it, lady. The bed is soft. This carpet looks expensive as hell. It'd be a crime to get it dirty. I'm helping you, and I'm helping my wallet. Well, I guess it's my wallet now." Crystal looked from me to the bed, the fear in her eyes fading, replaced by a very, very strange expression. She hesitated for a moment before slowly, almost gracefully, climbing onto the massive bed. And then, she actually knelt on it. She knelt there on the soft mattress, her head tilted up slightly to look at me. Her cheek had a faint pink blush from my slap, but her eyes were shockingly bright. It looked like there were excited flames dancing in them. Was I seeing things? Ding. Beginner mission complete. Reward, 10 points. Host, please continue your efforts to play the role of the vicious supporting character. The system's voice finally returned to normal. I let out a breath. I didn't know I was holding my back soaked with cold sweat. I'd squeaked by, even if the whole thing was bizarre. I didn't dare look into Crystal's overly bright eyes again. I huffed, trying to look tough, and turned to flee the suffocating room. Stop! A cool, clear voice, laced with a strange magnetic quality, sounded behind me. It was Crystal. I froze, my body rigid as I slowly turned back. Sometime while I wasn't looking, she'd gotten off the bed. She was standing right behind me, so close I could smell the faint, gardenia-like scent coming from her. Mr. Hayes, she tilted her head, a faint smirk playing on her lips that sent a shiver down my spine. Is that all you've got? WH, what do you mean? I instinctively took a step back, nearly tripping over my own feet. She closed the distance between us, her eyes locking onto mine, the light in them so intense it felt like it could burn me. You don't even know how to bully someone? Do you need me to teach you? What? Hold on. This isn't in the script. Wasn't she supposed to be looking at me with tear-filled eyes, pathetically accusing me of being a monster? What was this excited, almost encouraging tone? Her stare was making my skin crawl. What? What do you want? I'm warning you, don't try anything. Crystal let out a soft laugh, a sound like feathers tickling my eardrum. She didn't say another word, just gave me one last, long look. It was so complex, I couldn't even begin to decipher it. Then, she walked around me and straight out of the room, leaving me standing there completely and utterly bewildered. From that day on, my career as the vicious supporting character went completely off the rails. The system would issue a mission, throw coffee on the female lead. I'd stand there with a scalding cup of coffee, my hand shaking like I had Parkinson's, and end up accidentally spilling it all over my own hand, hissing in pain. Crystal would just sit across from me, calmly stirring her cappuccino, her eyes glancing at my reddened skin with an unreadable smile. The system would issue a mission, rip up the female lead's homework. I'd sneak around when no one was looking, find her notebook, and tear a tiny little corner before my conscience got the better of me. Then I'd secretly tape it back together with Scotch tape, a clumsy, crinkled mess. The next day, Crystal would hold up that notebook in front of the whole class, point at the ugly tape, and ask in a hurt voice, Ethan, do you know anything about this? I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. The system would issue a mission, spread rumors about the female lead. I'd post anonymously on the school's online forum. Shocking. Crystal Vance from Junior Homeroom 3 is actually a huge nerd who loves to study, and attach a picture I'd sneakily taken of her reading in a library. The replies were a flood of, dude, are you okay? Oh, is that a rumor? Nice pic, though. Can I get the original? Every single mission was a clumsy, nerve-wracking disaster. I was constantly on the verge of being punished by the system, only to pass by the skin of my teeth at the last second. And Crystal's reactions just kept getting weirder. Her expression when she looked at me morphed from fear and curiosity to an aggressive kind of interest, like a cat that's found a fascinating ball of yarn. It doesn't want to destroy it right away. It wants to bat it around and see what other fun things it can do. She was starting to seriously creep me out. I tried to avoid her at all costs, which only seemed to increase the number of times she'd accidentally run into me. Until the day the system issued the ultimate mission. Main Quest issued. At the annual Academy Gala, publicly accuse Crystal Vance of stealing your family's antique silver locket and push her off the stage. Mission success. 1,000 points and unlocks the next plotline. Mission failure. System will initiate the ultimate obliteration protocol. Ultimate obliteration. My knees went weak. I almost dropped to the floor and begged the system for mercy. This mission was just plain evil. It wasn't just about ruining someone's reputation. It was about causing physical harm. In the original novel, This was the event that made the hero finally decide to destroy Ethan Hayes for good. That night, the school auditorium was a sea of glittering lights and buzzing crowds. Crystal, as the student representative, was scheduled to give a speech. She wore a white formal gown and stood under the spotlight, looking so beautiful she could have been an angel who'd fallen to earth. I hid behind the heavy curtains backstage, clutching the cold silver locket in my hand, my palms slick with sweat. "Host, execute the mission immediately," the system urged, its voice as cold as ever. I can't do it," I whispered, watching the radiant girl on stage. Sure, she was acting weird, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy her like this. My conscience wouldn't let me. 10-second countdown. 10, 9. The shadow of death fell over me. 8, 7. My teeth were chattering. 6, 5. Crystal finished her speech and bowed to the audience. 4, 3. She turned, her eyes finding my hiding spot in the curtains with pinpoint accuracy. Was it a knowing smile on her face? 2. My mind went completely blank. 1. In the final split second before the countdown ended, I don't know where the courage came from, but I burst out from behind the curtain and charged straight for Crystal in the center of the stage. Gasps and screams erupted from the audience. But just as I was about to reach her, my foot slipped on the polished floor. I lost my balance completely. Instead of pushing her, I flailed my arms like an octopus and pitched forward right at her. The scene I had dreaded, pushing her off the stage, never happened. Instead, Ethan Hayes, in front of the entire school, face-planted at Crystal Vance's feet in the most pathetic way imaginable, managing to wrap my arms around her legs in the process. The entire auditorium fell into a dead silence. I looked up, meeting Crystal's gaze as she looked down at me. There was no surprise in her eyes, no anger. Only a sort of I knew it understanding and that same deeply unsettling interest, which was now more intense than ever. The locket in my hand flew from my grasp on impact, clattering onto the floor and breaking in two with a sickening crack. Ethan, Crystal's voice, amplified by the microphone clipped to her dress, echoed clearly through the hall. It was filled with the perfect amount of panic and hurt. Why? Why would you push me? You even broke my locket. What? Wait a minute. That was my locket. The prop the system gave me. How did it become hers? The audience exploded. Oh my God. Ethan Hayes just attacked Crystal Vance. And he broke her locket. He's a monster. He's caught red-handed. Let's see him try to talk his way out of this one. I was speechless, trapped. My vision started to go dark. It was over. There was no way to explain this. Host has severely deviated from the mission plotline, initiating ultimate obliteration protocol. The system's synthetic voice screeched in my head, sharp and piercing. I felt a powerful, irresistible force ripping my consciousness apart. An agony I can't describe swept through me, and my world went black. In the last moment before I lost consciousness completely, I thought I saw Crystal kneel down, her cool fingers brushing against my cheek as she whispered, in a voice only we could hear, "So naughty. But this is better." I don't know how much time passed. I woke up slowly, my head splitting, my entire body aching like it had been taken apart and put back together wrong. Was I dead? Or had I been reincarnated again? I forced my heavy eyelids open. What I saw wasn't a familiar ceiling, and it definitely wasn't the afterlife. It was a room I'd never seen before, so luxurious it was almost obscene. Giant floor-to-ceiling windows were half covered by heavy velvet drapes, letting in only a sliver of weak light. The furniture was all antique European style, ornate and expensive. The air was filled with a faint, cool fragrance, a lot like the one Crystal wore, but colder. I tried to sit up, but my limbs felt heavy. I looked down and saw it. A delicate, silver metal ring was fastened around my ankle. A thin silver chain connected the ring to the heavy, carved post at the foot of the bed. The chain was just long enough for me to move around the room a little, but there was no way I could reach the door. Was I a prisoner? My mind went blank with a deafening buzz. Just then, the door opened with a soft click. Crystal walked in, carrying a tray. She had changed out of her formal gown and was wearing simple clothes for around the house, her long hair loose around her shoulders. She looked much softer, but the way she looked at me was darker than ever, her eyes swirling with an intensity one couldn't comprehend. "You're awake?" She walked to the bedside and placed the tray on the nightstand. On it was a bowl of simple soup and some plain crackers. Eat something. Crystal, where's this? Why have you locked me up? My voice was raw with fear. She leaned down, and her cool fingers traced my cheek again. This time it wasn't a light brush, but a slow, possessive caress. This is our home, she said with a small smile. It was a beautiful smile, but it made my blood run cold. As for why you're locked up, she leaned close to my ear, her warm breath ghosting over my skin. Her voice was as soft as a lover's whisper, but it held an unshakable, obsessive edge. Because you're always trying to run away, and naughty children need to be kept in. My body went rigid. I felt like I'd been plunged into ice water. She straightened up and pulled a small, elegant picture frame from a nearby drawer, holding it in front of me. In the frame was a picture of me, asleep. The angle was intimate, as if the person taking it had been watching me for a very long time. She looked from the photo to me, her eyes full of a strange, devoted obsession. Her fingers, holding the frame, were white at the knuckles from the force of her grip, trembling with a restrained excitement. See, you look so well-behaved when you're asleep. I stared at her almost pathological expression, a chill shooting from the soles of my feet to the top of my head. It was over. I think. I've gotten myself into trouble with someone very, very dangerous. And that damn system? Ever since I died and woken up here, it had gone completely silent. Now, I wasn't the unwilling villain forced by system anymore. I was the one and only prey she had set her sights on. She leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead. Her voice was gentle, terrifyingly gentle. From now on, you'll just stay here quietly. You'll only look at me, and you'll belong only to me. Okay. Outside, the sky was growing dark, the last traces of light swallowed by the night. I was a prisoner. Imprisoned by the girl who was supposed to be the innocent heroine of this story, locked away in this gorgeous cage. And in my ears, I could almost hear that cold, synthetic voice of the system again. But this time, the message was different, tinged with a mocking, gleeful tone, echoing over and over. Now, you need to be a little bitch. I stared at the cold metal ring around my ankle, feeling like I was trapped in a bizarre, surreal nightmare. The silver chain gleamed faintly in the dim light, its other end secured to the heavy bedpost. Its length had been precisely calculated, just enough for me to use the attached bathroom, but nowhere near long enough to reach the door. Our home. I repeated her words, my voice cracking, desperately searching for any hint that this was all a joke. Crystal, do you have any idea what you're doing? This is kidnapping. It's illegal. She pushed the tray a little closer to me. The warm steam from the soup rose in the air, a stark contrast to the coldness radiating from her. Illegal. She tilted her head slightly, a faint smile playing on her lips, but her eyes were sharp enough to cut through my bravado. Ethan, after you attacked me in front of the entire student body and destroyed my locket, who do you think they're going to believe? I was speechless. That scene at the gala. To everyone else, it was just me, Ethan Hayes, the school bully, taking things way too far. The evidence, the broken locket, and all the witnesses meant I didn't have a leg to stand on. But that locket was from the system. I blurted out, then immediately bit my tongue. The system? How could I possibly explain that? Hey, I was possessed by a vicious supporting character app that made me try to bully you. They'd think I was even crazier than they already did. Crystal's gaze deepened, as if she'd caught the key piece of information in my unfinished sentence. But she didn't press. She just watched me with those all-seeing eyes, making my skin crawl. Eat, she said, placing a spoon beside my hand. Her tone was soft, but left no room for argument. You need to get your strength back. I looked at the simple soup, my stomach churning. Not from nausea, but from pure fear. Who knew what she might have put in it? I'm not hungry, I said, turning my head away in defiance. She didn't get angry. She simply picked up the spoon herself, scooped up some soup, blew on it gently, and held it to my lips. Want me to feed you? Her voice was quiet, laced with a strange tenderness. I can do that. I looked at her face, so close to mine, and saw that she wasn't joking. I knew, with absolute certainty, that if I didn't eat, she would find a way to make me eat. Humiliation and fear warred within me. My jaw stiff, I opened my mouth and swallowed the spoonful of soup. It was a perfect temperature with a rich, savory flavor. It seemed normal. She watched me swallow, a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes, before scooping up another spoonful. Just like that, under her silent, unwavering gaze, I ate the entire bowl of soup. The only sounds in the room were the soft clinking of the spoon against the bowl and the frantic, desperate pounding of my own heart. When I was finished, she picked up a napkin and gently wiped the corner of my mouth. I froze, not daring to move a muscle. "Good boy," she praised, like I was a pet that had just performed a trick. She tidied up the tray, but didn't leave right away. Instead, she walked to the window and pulled back the other half of the heavy curtain. Night had completely fallen. A thick darkness shrouded everything outside. I couldn't see any lights, only an endless black, as if this mansion was built at the edge of the world. "It's very quiet here. No one will bother us," she said, her back to me, her voice drifting across the room. "You can get some rest." Rest? I couldn't stop my voice from rising. "You mean rest like a dog on a leash? Crystal, let me out of here." She turned, leaning against the window. The moonlight outlined her slender figure, but it radiated an unshakable power. "Out? And then what?" she asked calmly. "Go back to that family that only pushes you to do things you hate? Or back to that school where everyone treats you like a joke?" I froze. How did she know? How did she know that things weren't as perfect at home as they seemed? How did she know that at school, I was just a walking punchline people whispered about behind my back? The original Ethan Hayes was a one-dimensional villain, a plot device. No one ever cared about what was going on inside his head. Not even that damn system. It only cared about mission completion. I wanted to argue, but I had nothing to say. In my old world, I was a nobody just trying to get by. After coming here, I was a hated villain forced to act by a system. Neither place felt like home. "Here," she said, walking back toward the bed, step by step, her shadow falling over me like a physical weight. "You don't have to pretend. You don't have to do those things that scare you. You just have to be yourself." Her fingers touched my cheek again, lingering this time, the cool contact making me shiver. "Be myself." I whispered, my mind a chaotic mess. Who was I? The couch potato from the 21st century? Or Ethan Hayes, the villain from this book? Yes. Her fingertips slid to my chin, tilting it up gently, forcing me to meet her gaze. The real you. The one who's scared of electric shocks, who worries about expensive carpets. The coward who doesn't even know how to be mean. The pathetic Ethan Hayes. My pupils contracted. She'd seen it all. From that first pathetic slap to every other clumsy attempt at villainy. She'd seen right through my act. So all her previous reactions, her playing victim, was it all an act? Was she playing along with me? Or was she luring me into a trap? A wave of cold dread washed over me. You knew from the very beginning. My voice trembled with disbelief. Crystal didn't answer directly. She just smiled, a hauntingly beautiful and dangerous smile in the moonlight. "You know, Ethan," she leaned in, her whisper brushing against my ear, "your clumsy, see-through attempts at being evil are so much more interesting than the real thing. Like a little lost animal that's wandered into a predator's territory, scared to death, but still trying to puff out its chest and bare its teeth. It's just so adorable." Adorable? I was floored. She thought that was adorable? I was pathetic. A total loser. But as I listened to her amused voice, why did I feel, underneath all the terror, a shameful, twisted sense of being seen? Of being accepted? No. Stop it. I couldn't let her mess with my head. This was kidnapping. She was unhinged. This was a crime. I violently shoved her hand away. Even though my heart was hammering against my ribs, I forced myself to sound tough. "Don't touch me. Crystal, I don't care what you're planning. Let me go. Or else. Or else. Or else what?" She watched me, a picture of calm amusement, as if enjoying my final, desperate struggles. Or else. What could I do? Call the cops? As far as the world was concerned, she was the victim. Tell my family? They'd probably be thrilled that their embarrassing son had disappeared. Hope the hero of the story would save me. In the original book, he was probably off on some business trip right now. I realized with a sinking feeling that I had no one and nothing to fall back on. A profound sense of powerlessness crushed me. Seeing my slumped shoulders and the fading light in my eyes, a flicker of satisfaction crossed Crystal's face. She didn't push any further. She straightened up, smoothing the wrinkles in her clothes. "Get some rest tonight." Her voice returned to its calm, even tone, but it was dripping with absolute control. "I'll come see you tomorrow." She picked up the tray and walked towards the door, her heels making no sound on the thick carpet. Just before the door closed, she glanced back at me, her eyes as deep and dark as the night sky outside. "Remember, this is your entire world now, and I am the only one in it." The door clicked shut, and the sound of the lock turning echoed in the silence. I was alone, trapped in this beautiful, cold room. The silver chain on my ankle was a constant, cruel reminder of my reality. The system was gone, but the world's malice had found a new host, a more tangible and obsessive one that was now focused entirely on me. I was being held captive by the story's heroine. What the hell kind of plot twist was this? I collapsed back onto the ridiculously soft bed, staring up at the ornate crystal chandelier. I felt like a songbird in a gilded cage, and the collector was busy admiring her prize, declaring her ownership in the most twisted way imaginable. My future looked like a long, dark tunnel with no end in sight. The days blurred together in that luxurious, suffocating cage. Crystal became the only person I saw. She would show up at the same times every day, bring me my meals, and watch until I finished eating. At first, I tried to resist. I went on a hunger strike, but she always had ways of making me give in. Not with violence, but with something far more unnerving, a cold, silent pressure. She would just sit quietly by the bed, watching me with those all-seeing eyes, not saying a word, until the weight of her stare became unbearable and I would robotically pick up the spoon. After a while, I learned my lesson. Or maybe I just went numb. Eat, sleep, stare out the window at the endless, unchanging darkness. The silver chain on my ankle became a part of me, the boundaries of my world memorized down to the last inch. She didn't always talk. Often, she would just sit in the room, in a single velvet armchair, not far from the bed, reading a book, or simply watching me. That stare wasn't like looking at a person. It was more like admiring a piece in a collection, something she had spent a great deal of effort to acquire. It was focused, satisfied, and carried a possessive chill that made my skin crawl. "It's a beautiful day out," she said one afternoon, closing her book. I was curled up in a corner of the bed. I barely flickered an eyelid in response. What did I care if the weather was nice? I couldn't see it. She didn't seem to expect an answer. She stood up, walked to the window, and yanked the heavy curtains all the way open. Blinding sunlight flooded the room. I instinctively squinted, my eyes aching after being accustomed to the dim light. But then my breath caught. It wasn't darkness outside. Beyond the window was a vast, meticulously manicured rose garden. Blood-red roses bloomed extravagantly under the sun, their colors so intense it almost hurt to look at. Farther out were perfectly trimmed lawns and a dense forest, all under a brilliant blue sky. This wasn't some remote shack in the middle of nowhere. This was a sprawling, opulent estate. "Do you like it?" Crystal's voice had a hint of pride, as if she was showing off a gift. "I picked this room especially for you. It has the best view. You can see the whole garden." I just stared, a storm of emotions churning inside me. For me? So, locking me up like a pet was some kind of favor? "Let me go for a walk," I heard myself demand, my voice hoarse. Even if it was just in the garden, to feel real earth under my feet, to breathe air that smelled like flowers. Crystal turned. The sun backlit her, obscuring her face, but her eyes were still shockingly bright. "No," she said, her refusal swift and absolute. There was no room for negotiation. "Why not? I just want to walk in the garden, not even if you're watching me." A sudden anger flared up, the repressed frustration of my imprisonment finally boiling over. She walked slowly back to the bed, her shadow falling over me again. "The world outside is dangerous, Ethan." She reached out, her fingertips lightly brushing through my hair. The gesture was gentle, but her tone was obsessively certain. "Only here are you safe. Only with me will you never be harmed." That excuse again, I jerked my head away from her touch, my anger rising. "Dangerous? What's dangerous? You're the most dangerous thing here. You're the one who locked me up." She looked at me, not with anger, but with a kind of patronizing look like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "You'll run," she said softly, stating it as a fact. "Just like last time." Last time? Did she mean when the system obliterated me? I didn't run. I didn't even have a choice. I was about to argue, but she suddenly leaned in close, her nose almost touching mine. That cool, gardenia scent enveloped me. Besides, her gaze dropped to my lips, her eyes darkening. I don't like it when your attention is drawn to other things. The flowers, the sun, even the air. I don't like it. Your eyes should only have me in them. Her domineering, completely illogical declaration sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just possessiveness. It was a pathological need for control. You're insane, I muttered. My words made her laugh, a low, pleased, and utterly terrifying sound. Maybe, she said, straightening up, her cool demeanor returning. But it's the only way to make you completely mine. She didn't give me a chance to respond. She turned and left the room. The sun still streamed in, and the roses still bloomed outside. But all that beauty was just decoration for my gilded cage. I watched her leave, a cold realization dawning on me for the first time. Escaping was going to be 100 times harder than I ever imagined. This woman wasn't acting on a whim. This was all part of her plan, and she was enjoying every second of it. After that day, Crystal seemed to pay even more attention to my mental state. She started bringing things into the room. First, it was books, all kinds, from dense literary classics to light-hearted graphic novels. But I couldn't focus on them. My mind was consumed with thoughts of escape. Then, she brought in a tablet. I downloaded some movies and games, she said, placing on a nightstand, to keep you from getting bored. I glanced at it, my heart skipping a beat. An electronic device. Did that mean a way to contact the outside world? But later, when she was gone, I eagerly turned it on, only for my hopes to plummet. No SIM card, no web browser, no apps that could connect to the internet. Just a few offline movies and single-player games she had preloaded. Even the file manager was locked. She had thought of everything. I wanted to smash the tablet in a fit of rage, but I raised my hand and then let it fall defeated. What good would it do? Other than provoking her and losing my one pathetic source of entertainment, I would gain nothing. A wave of crushing despair washed over me. I started to wander the room like a ghost, the sound of the chain dragging on the floor, my only companion. I began talking to myself, sometimes even hearing things like the cold, synthetic voice of that damn system. Now, you need to be a little bitch. A little bitch. Look at me. Wasn't I already pathetic enough? One day, Crystal came in holding a beautifully wrapped box. For you, she said, handing it to me. I felt no anticipation as I numbly opened it. Inside was a soft, expensive-looking white sweater. It's getting colder, she explained. I stared at the sweater. White, the same color as the dresses she always wore. A powerful, humiliating feeling of being branded, of being assimilated, washed over me. I'm not cold. I pushed the box and the glaringly white sweater away. Crystal watched me quietly, her face unreadable. The room fell into an uneasy silence. A few minutes later, she picked up the sweater and walked over to me. Put on. Her voice was still calm, but it held the weight of an approaching storm. I said, I'm not wearing it. I said, my voice strained, trying to hold on to my last shred of dignity. She didn't waste any more words. She just moved. Her strength was shocking. I struggled, the chain rattling uselessly, but I couldn't break her grip. She forced the white sweater over my head. Her movements weren't rough, but they were firm, unyielding. The sweater was soft and warm, but on my body, it felt like a suffocating second skin, another layer of my prison. She smoothed out the collar, studying me with a satisfied expression. It suits you, she said softly, her fingers brushing against my neck, sending a shiver through me. I looked in a mirror at the pale, hollow-eyed person staring back, dressed in white. For a moment, I felt like I was really becoming what she wanted, a quiet, obedient collector's item that belonged only to her. No, I couldn't let that happen. After she left, I frantically tried to pull the sweater off, but my hands froze as they touched the soft wool. What was the point? What would taking it off accomplish, other than earning me a more aggressive correction from her? My hands fell to my sides, a bone-deep weariness settling over me. In this world, where she was the only other person, my resistance felt pathetic and pointless. Outside, the setting sun painted the rose garden in shades of gold and crimson, a breathtaking sight. And I was locked away in the middle of it all, feeling the darkness slowly consume me from the inside out. The days of my imprisonment lost all meaning. I didn't know how long it had been. Days? Weeks? Maybe longer. Every day, I woke up to the same room, the same person, the same despair. My consciousness started to blur. I began to sleep for long periods, or rather, fall into a half-conscious state to escape this suffocating reality. When I was awake, I would just curl up in a corner of the bed, staring into space, becoming less and less responsive to Crystal's comings and goings. She seemed to notice the change in me. A dead, stagnant silence probably wasn't the kind of good behavior she was looking for. One day, she didn't leave after putting down my food. She sat in the armchair by the bed and just watched me for a long time. I kept my eyes closed, but I could feel her gaze on me like a cold spiderweb. I couldn't be bothered to move or react. "Ethan," she finally said, her voice sharp in the quiet room. I didn't move. "I know you're awake." Her tone was flat, emotionless. I remained still, like a soulless doll. I heard a soft rustle as she stood up. Her footsteps approached and stopped by the bed. She didn't touch me, just stood there, looking down. "Do you want to know what's been happening outside?" she asked suddenly. Outside. The word was like a small pebble dropped into a stagnant pond, creating the faintest ripple in my numb mind. My eyelashes fluttered. I still didn't open my eyes, but I think I held my breath for a second. She didn't miss it. I heard what sounded like a soft, self-satisfied laugh. "Your family," she began, her voice slow and deliberate, each word a hammer blow to my ears, "reported you missing. They made a show of searching for a little while. But it seems your father is more interested in the illegitimate son he just brought home, and your mother. Her attention is focused on her new season luxury goods and her poker buddies." My heart sank. I didn't have much affection for that family, but hearing just how little I mattered was a cold, bitter pill to swallow. "As for school," she continued, a hint of amusement in her voice, "there were some rumors at first. People said you were hiding in shame after what happened with me. But new gossip quickly took its place. After all, a nobody trust fund kid isn't worth remembering for long." A nobody. She was right. It seemed that no matter which world I was in, I was always the one who could be easily forgotten, easily replaced. The 21st century couch potato, the villain in this book. It was all the same. A deep sense of sorrow and self-loathing washed over me. I started to wonder, even if I did escape, what would I go back to? A reality where no one was waiting for me, where no one cared. And as for that system, that was always buzzing in your ear. Crystal's topic shifted, and she mentioned the one thing I cared about most. My eyes shot open. You still there?" She seemed pleased that I was finally reacting, a small smile touching her lips. "It won't be bothering you anymore," she said, her tone as cold and final as an executioner's blade. "A failed program has no reason to exist." A failed program? What did she know? How did she do it? I looked at her calm, expressionless face, and the chill in my heart deepened. This woman wasn't just holding me captive. She had been working behind the scenes, eliminating anything and anyone that might interfere with her control. "You see," she leaned over me, bracing her hands on either side of my body, trapping me between her and the bed, her dark eyes locking onto mine. "No one out there cares about you. No one is looking for you. And the thing that was forcing you to act is gone. The world has abandoned you." Her voice was soft, but her words hit me like a sledgehammer. Only I. Her fingertips traced the line of my eyebrow, a gesture of almost religious devotion. "Only I want you. Only I will never abandon you." Her words were like poison honey, striking at the most vulnerable, most terrified part of my soul. The fear of being alone, the fear of being abandoned. She was right. No one out there needed me. No one loved me. All my struggles, all my forced acts of villainy, had only earned me disgust and ridicule. But here, even though I was a prisoner, even though I had no freedom, at least, there was one person who so obsessively, so crazily needed me that she would go to such extremes to keep me by her side. In my fragile, self-doubting state, that twisted need began to feel like a strange, dark temptation. What was the point of fighting? Where would I even go if I escaped? My gaze unfocused. The walls I had built around my heart began to crumble under the weight of her words and the harsh reality of my situation. Crystal saw it. She saw my spirit breaking. She didn't push any further. She just held that intimidating position, letting me stew in the facts she had presented. After a long time, So long I felt the blood in my veins turn to sludge. She finally straightened up. She didn't leave. She went in the bathroom and came back with a warm, damp washcloth. She sat on the edge of the bed and began to gently wash my face, from my forehead down my cheeks to my neck. The warmth of the cloth chased away some of the numbness, and a gentle, almost clumsy, but incredibly patient gesture felt like a kindness I had never known. I was a puppet, letting her move me as she pleased. After washing my face, she picked up a comb and carefully began to work through my hair, which had become a tangled mess from days of lying in bed. The teeth of the comb scraped against my scalp, a slight, tingling sting. I didn't resist. When she hit a knot and I flinched, I heard her whisper, "Just a second, it'll be okay." In that moment, she didn't seem like my obsessive, insane captor. She seemed more like a normal person taking care of a sick partner. The bizarre, disorienting feeling made my head spin. When she was done, she looked at my slightly cleaner face, and her expression softened. "Are you hungry?" she asked. I looked at her, and after a few seconds of silence, I gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. A real, warm smile spread across her face. It was different from her usual cold or creepy smiles. This one made her whole face light up. She stood up and brought over the bowl of soup that had been sitting on the nightstand, likely lukewarm by now. She sat back down, scooped up a spoonful, and held it to my lips. This time I didn't resist. I obediently opened my mouth. The soup was warm, filled with the simple, sweet taste of food. I ate, spoonful by spoonful, as tears I didn't know I had began to stream down my face. They dripped into the bowl, and I swallowed them down with the soup. I couldn't tell if they were tears of humiliation, despair, or a kind of resigned, broken acceptance. Crystal watched me cry. She didn't comfort me or try to stop me. She just watched, her eyes deep as a whirlpool, as if she wanted to swallow me whole, tears and all. When the last spoonful was gone, she put the bowl down and gently wiped the tears from my cheeks with her fingers. "It's good to cry," she said, her voice low and soft. "Cry out all the unnecessary things. From now on, you only need to look at me, think of me. That's enough." She leaned down, and a kiss, light as a feather, landed on my forehead. It was a kiss of almost sacred possession. I closed my eyes, feeling that cold press against my skin. It felt like a brand, searing itself into my very soul. The touch on my forehead was cool, but it burned like a branding iron, sending a tremor through my entire being. I jerked my head away, evading the kiss that felt as light as a feather, but as heavy as lead. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic prisoner trying to break free. "Don't touch me." The words were hoarse, laced with a weakness and terror that I hated in myself. Crystal's motion stopped. She didn't get angry right away. She slowly straightened up, her deep eyes fixed on me, a dark, unreadable current swirling within them. The air in the room grew thick, so heavy it was hard to breathe. I clutched the sheets beneath me, my nails digging into my palms. I was terrified of what she might do, of some unknown punishment. But deep down, that small, fragile part of me that was still me had sounded an alarm, forcing me to resist. Just when I thought she would snap, the storm in her eyes seemed to calm, replaced by something I couldn't quite place. A look of almost patient resignation. She sighed, a barely audible breath, and reached out, not to touch me, but to carefully tuck a strand of hair, messed up by my sudden movement, behind my ear. "All right, I won't," she said, her voice unnervingly calm, as if my outburst was nothing more than a childish tantrum. This feeling of punching a pillow left me even more disoriented. She didn't mention it again. Instead, she picked up the empty bowl and stood. "Get some rest," she said, and then, just like always, she turned and left the room. The lock clicked into place. I collapsed onto the bed, gasping for air, my back soaked in a cold sweat. I had resisted, and I hadn't been punished, so why did I feel even more unsettled? Her calm, all-knowing attitude was more terrifying than any direct threat. In the days that followed, Crystal acted as if nothing had happened. She brought my food, watched me eat, and occasionally left a new book or updated the content on the tablet. She made no attempt to touch me, maintaining a careful, calculated distance. She started talking to me more, not with her usual declarations, but as if attempting a conversation. "Did you finish this book?" she asked one day, picking up a novel I'd tossed aside. I was curled up on the armchair. The chain was just long enough, staring out the window, and didn't answer. The main character in it, he used every method he could to keep the person he loved. She continued, unbothered by my silence, her voice even. "Do you think he was right to do that?" My heart skipped a beat. Was she hinting at something? Testing me? I remained silent, my fingers unconsciously picking at the velvet of the armchair. "I don't think he was wrong," she said softly, as if stating a universal truth. "Love is possession. It's exclusive. If you can't have all of it, what's the difference between that and having none of it?" Twisted logic. Utterly insane. I screamed in my head, but didn't dare say it out loud. I was afraid that if I engaged, she'd drag me into her warped worldview, and I'd never get out. She didn't seem to need my agreement. She was just planting these ideas like seeds in the barren soil of my mind. Sometimes she'd bring pastries, claiming she'd bake them herself. "Try one," she said, placing a small, perfectly formed cake on the coffee table in front of me. "I remember you used to like sweet things." Used to? Was she talking about the original Ethan from the book, or the me she'd been observing? I eyed the tempting cake, but didn't move. Who knew what was in it? She saw my wariness, and her expression flickered with something like disappointment, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Fine, don't eat it." She picked up the cake, took a small bite herself, and chewed slowly before looking at me. "It's not poisoned." Was that her way of proving it? The whole situation felt bizarrely domestic and deeply unsettling. She would also share parts of her day. "I had to deal with a few things today," she'd say, sitting on the opposite sofa, rubbing her temples, a rare hint of fatigue in her voice. "Some people just don't know their place. They need to be reminded." Dealing with things? Reminded? I was slowly realizing that Crystal Vance was far more than just a high school student. To own an estate like this, to make my family and the school give up on me so easily, to somehow get rid of that system. Her background was terrifyingly powerful. It felt like she was slowly revealing her world to me. A powerful, dark world that was, for some reason, open only to me. This special treatment didn't make me feel special. It made my blood run cold. She was taming me. Like boiling a frog in slowly warming water, she was wearing down my defenses, making me accustomed to her presence, her control, until I might even start to depend on this tiny world she provided. I knew it, but I felt powerless to stop it. Because she was right. There was nothing for me on the outside. Here, I had no freedom, but I was fed, clothed, and there was someone who obsessively considered me her one and only. In the endless days of captivity, that twisted connection was beginning to breed a strange sense of dependence. One night, I had a nightmare. I dreamed of the system's electric shocks, of the original Ethan's gruesome death, of Crystal holding that silver chain, smiling as she wrapped it around my neck, pulling it tighter and tighter. I woke up with a scream, drenched in cold sweat, my heart racing. Almost instantly, the door opened, and Crystal rushed in, wearing her pajamas. Her hair was a little messy, and her face was etched with genuine concern, not an act. "What's wrong?" She hurried to the bedside, instinctively reaching for me before stopping herself, her hand hovering in the air. I was still shaking, gasping for air, staring at her face in the dim glow of the nightlight. For a split second, I felt a strange sense of relief. The thought horrified me. "A nightmare?" she asked softly, her voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. I didn't speak, just stared at her. She hesitated, then turned and poured a glass of water, handing it to me. "Drink some water. It'll help." I looked from a glass in her hand to her worried face, and, to my own surprise, I took it. The warm water soothed my dry throat and calmed some of the terror. She sat on the edge of the bed, quietly staying with me until my breathing evened out. In that moment, the world was silent except for the sound of our breathing. There was no captor and captive, no struggle and submission, just a strange, fleeting sense of peace. For a horrifying second, I had the delusion that we were just a normal couple. "No, stop it." I jolted, shoving the glass back in her hands and pulling the covers up, turning my back to her. "I'm fine now. You can go," I said, my voice muffled. There was a moment of silence behind me. Then I heard her stand up. Her footsteps faded, and the door clicked shut. The room was mine again, but I couldn't get back to sleep. That moment of relief was like a poison dart lodged in my heart. I wasn't scared of her cruelty anymore. I was scared of these rare glimpses of seemingly normal tenderness. They were far more corrosive than any direct harm. Crystal Vance. In her own way, little by little, she was remaking my world into a shape that contained only her. Crystal was still Crystal. She brought my meals, sat in silence, and watched me with that obsessive gaze. But something had definitely changed. I started to watch her more closely, to observe my captor. She was busy, it seemed, not always here. But when she did appear, it was with clockwork regularity, as if I were a scheduled appointment in her day. Her clothes were always impeccable, radiating a cool, collected authority that seemed beyond her years. When she spoke of dealing with things, her eyes would sharpen with an unquestionable power. I was more certain than ever that she was no ordinary high school girl. One day, she came in carrying the faintest, almost imperceptible scent of blood. My senses, honed by long-term confinement, had become unervingly sharp. The smell was faint, masked by her usual cold gardenia fragrance, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. She placed my lunch in front of me, as usual. I found myself staring at her hands. They were slender and pale, her nails perfectly manicured. What could hands like that have been touching? "What are you looking at?" she asked coolly, noticing my stare. "You smell like something," I said, my voice low, my eyes dropping to the tray. She paused, then lifted her arm to her nose, a slight frown creasing her brow. "Just dealt with a disobedient bug," she said dismissively, as if she'd just swatted a fly. "A bug? What kind of bug leaves the smell of blood?" A chill crept up my spine. The outside world she inhabited was even darker than I'd imagined. She didn't elaborate, just watched me. Did I scare you? I pressed my lips together and didn't answer. Was I scared? Maybe. But more than that, it was the cold confirmation of what I already suspected. I was dealing with someone who possessed terrifying power and had zero qualms about using it. Seeing my silence, her expression darkened slightly. "This is how the world works, Ethan," she said, sitting across from me, her voice flat. "It's a food chain. You either control others, or you are controlled. There's no in-between." I simply chose the former. Her gaze landed on me, burning with intensity and to hold on tightly to the one thing I want most. That twisted logic again, justifying her obsessive possessiveness as a law of nature. "I'm not a thing." I couldn't help but retort, my voice hoarse. "Of course you're not," she actually agreed, nodding, her eyes growing deeper. "You're my treasure, my one and only." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the brilliant sun and the vibrant roses. "Look at those flowers," she said, her back to me. "No matter how beautiful they are, they need a gardener to prune and care for them. Otherwise, they'll be choked by weeds and wither away. You're the same, Ethan. You need my protection, my guidance. Without me, you'll just be devoured by this cruel world." I watched her straight, lonely silhouette, my mind a chaotic mess. She seemed to genuinely believe her own logic, that everything she was doing was to protect me. This warped perception was more hopeless than simple malice. The days continued to pass in captivity. My world remained this room and the attached bathroom. Occasionally, Crystal would wheel in a clothing rack filled with all kinds of clothes, every single one of them in shades of white. "Pick what you like," she'd say. I'd look at the rows of glaring white, feeling like a doll about to be dressed up. I never moved. She wouldn't force it then. She'd simply choose a soft, white loungewear set and place it on the bed. "Try this on. The fabric is very comfortable." I wouldn't touch it. The next day, she'd come in and see me still wearing the previous day's clothes, and her eyes would turn cold. She wouldn't say a word, just pick up the white outfit and walk over to me. "Put on." It was a command, not a request. I'd stubbornly turn my head away. She'd stop wasting words and just do it. Her strength was, as always, shocking. My futile struggles were a joke to her. The chain would rattle, a soundtrack to my powerlessness. She would forcibly strip me of my old clothes and dress me in the white ones. Her movements weren't rough, but they were cold and unyielding. The fabric was indeed soft against my skin, but it felt like being wrapped in a suffocating cocoon. She would straighten the collar, studying me as if admiring a newly finished work of art. "White suits you," she'd whisper, her fingers brushing my collarbone. Clean. Pure. I would close my eyes, refusing to look at the reflection of the person she was turning me into. The humiliation was a vine, twisting tighter and tighter around my heart. But in the midst of this extreme oppression and despair, the basic instinct for survival, like a blade of grass pushing through concrete, began to quietly grow. I couldn't just give up. No matter how careful Crystal was, she had to have moments of weakness. No matter how isolated this estate was, there had to be a link to the outside world. I needed to be patient. I needed to watch. I needed to wait for an opportunity that might never come. I started forcing myself to eat every meal, even when it tasted like ash. I had to keep my strength up. I started pretending to be interested in the books and movies she brought, sometimes even offering vague, non-committal responses when she shared her views. I had to lower her guard. I even started paying attention to the faint sound from outside the door when she left, to the occasional scent of the outside she carried on her clothes. One day, while she was bringing me afternoon tea, I noticed a sliver of silver peeking out from the edge of her pants pocket. It looked like a key. My heart hammered against my ribs. A key. Was it for this room? Or somewhere else? She seemed to notice my gaze and casually pushed the silver object deeper in her pocket, her eyes sweeping over me sharply. I immediately looked down, pretending to be focused on the pastry in my hand, my heart pounding like a drum. She watched me for a few seconds, but apparently saw nothing amiss and turned to leave. From that day on, I was even more careful. I knew that the slightest hint of abnormality would alert this sharp-eyed predator. I continued to wear the white clothes she chose, continued to live within the boundaries she set, continued to endure her obsessive gaze. But deep inside, that small ember of hope had not been completely extinguished. I was waiting for a slim, desperate chance to break out of this beautiful cage. And Crystal, for her part, seemed quite pleased with my increasingly docile behavior. The way she looked at me now had less of that initial scrutiny and more of a tender possessiveness. Pretending was exhausting. Every day, I had to maintain a surface-level numbness, a feigned submission, while burying the desperate urge to escape so deep it wouldn't show on my face. Eating, reading, staring out the window, occasionally giving a non-committal grunt to Crystal's probing questions, I acted the part of a prisoner who was slowly losing his will. Crystal seemed very satisfied with my progress. The look of triumphant ownership in her eyes grew stronger. Sometimes she would allow me, under her watchful eye, to move around a little within the chain's radius, like taking a few slow steps in the center of the room. To her, it was probably a gift. To me, it was a precious opportunity to survey my surroundings. I noted that the door was made of heavy, solid wood with excellent soundproofing. The lock was an old-fashioned mechanical one that required a specific key. This made me even more obsessed with the silver object I'd glimpsed. The windows were massive panes of incredibly strong glass. I had secretly tried to strike the edge with my elbow. It didn't even vibrate. It had to be some kind of reinforced or bulletproof glass. Besides, I was on the second floor, right above that beautiful but thorny rose garden. Even if I could break the window, the fall would either impale me or break my legs. My only hope seemed to be that door, and that potential key. I had to be more patient. This afternoon, when Crystal came in, she looked paler than usual. There was a weariness in her eyes she couldn't quite hide, and even the cold aura around her seemed diminished. She placed a plate of pastries on a small table in front of me, as usual, then sank into the opposite armchair, closed her eyes, and began rubbing her temples. It was a rare, unguarded moment. My heart skipped a beat. An opportunity? No, it was too obvious. This could be a test. I forced myself to look away, picked up a pastry, and took small, tasteless bites. But out of the corner of my eye, I kept her locked in my sights. She seemed genuinely exhausted. She sat with her eyes closed for a long time, her breathing growing slow and even. Was she asleep? Impossible. She was too paranoid to actually fall asleep in front of me. But I did notice that the hand resting on her lap was clenched slightly, her knuckles white, as if she were enduring some kind of pain. And that faint smell of blood seemed a little stronger today. Was she hurt? The thought made my heart clench, a reaction I immediately suppressed. What did I care if she was hurt? I should be glad. If she was weak, my chances were better. The minutes ticked by, the silence in the room broken only by our breathing. I put down the half-eaten pastry, picked up a book, and pretended to read, but my fingers trembled with tension. Just then, Crystal's hand, which had been resting on the arm of the chair, slid off and dangled at her side. And from the edge of her pants pocket, that flash of silver appeared again, clearer than before. It was a ring of keys, and the teeth of one of them looked like a perfect match for the lock on my door. My breathing hitched. The keys, right there, within reach. If I was fast enough while she was resting. The temptation was a siren song in my head. My rational mind screamed that it was a trap, but my desperate instinct for freedom shrieked louder. Should I risk it? My palms were sweating, crumpling the edge of the book. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I gently set the book down and slowly, carefully, got to my feet. The chain made a soft, scraping sound, deafening in the quiet room. I froze, my eyes darting to Crystal. She was still, her eyes closed, her breathing even. She hadn't stirred. I steeled myself and, quiet as a cat, began to inch towards her. The chain gave me just enough slack to reach the side of her armchair. Closer, closer. I could see the fine lines of her eyelashes, her pale lips, and the tantalizing silver keys in her pocket. My hand shaking, I slowly reached out, my fingers stretching towards the cool metal. The air was thick with the scent of gardenias and that faint hint of blood, a heart-stopping combination. Just as my fingertips were about to brush against the keys, an iron grip closed around my wrist. The force was incredible, enough to crush bone. My head snapped up in terror, and I met a pair of wide-open eyes. There was no trace of sleep in them, only a cold, sharp light of disappointment and certainty. I knew it. Crystal's voice was low, dangerously calm. You still haven't learned. It was a trap. She wasn't asleep at all. She was waiting for me. Panic seized me. I tried to yank my arm back, but her grip was like a steel vise. Let go of me. I whimpered, struggling, the chain rattling wildly. Using my own momentum against me, she shot to her feet, her other hand clamping down on my shoulder and slamming me back down into the armchair. The impact made my vision swim. She loomed over me, her shadow swallowing me whole. Her eyes, stripped of all their feigned tenderness, were now bottomless pits of fury. I gave you a chance, Ethan, she hissed, her fingers digging into my shoulder. I tolerated your moods, your noncompliance. I thought eventually you'd understand. You'd accept it. But all you can think about is running away. Her voice was quiet, but the pressure behind it was suffocating. Was I too good to you? Did that give you the delusion that you could challenge me? No. I tried to explain, to beg, but fear had stolen my words. She wasn't listening. She leaned down, her forehead pressing against mine, her cold breath on my face. It seems you need a more permanent lesson, she whispered, to remember who your master is. Those last words were like icicles stabbing into my heart. She released my wrist and, under my horrified gaze, reached in her own pocket and pulled out the keys. She dangled the one from my door in front of my face, a cruel, cold smile twisting her lips. You want this? I stared at her, my heart sinking into a black abyss. Then, as I watched in utter despair, her hand clenched. With a sharp snap, the brass key broke in two. She had broken it with her bare hands. The two pieces fell silently onto the thick carpet, but the sound echoed in my skull like a gunshot. She broke a metal key with her bare hands? What kind of monstrous strength was that? My blood ran cold, freezing in my veins. All this time, I knew she was strong, but I never imagined she was inhumanly strong. She let go of me, straightened up, and tossed the rest of the keychain back in her pocket as if it were trash. She then picked up the broken key head from the floor and pocketed that as well. She looked down at me, collapsed in the armchair, my face as white as a sheet. Her eyes were once again calm, cold, and in complete control. Now, she said, have you given up? She didn't wait for an answer. She turned and walked out of the room with steady, measured steps. The lock clicked shut. I was a boneless heap, unable to move. My mind replayed the image of the keys snapping, of her freezing, merciless eyes. Hope, in that single, sharp crack, had been utterly shattered. Along with it, the last bit of courage I had managed to scrape together turned to dust. It was over. This time, it was really over. I closed my eyes, and a tide of absolute despair washed over me, drowning me completely. The sharp crack of the key, breaking, seemed to have snapped a tightly wound string in my own mind. A long, dead silence followed. I remained slumped in the armchair, in the same pathetic position she'd left me in for a very long time. I stared blankly at the ornate patterns on the ceiling, my vision a hollow blur. So this is what it felt like to have your hope crushed in someone's bare hands. It was worse than when the system had declared my obliteration, because this time I had personally delivered that sliver of a chance to its destroyer and watched it die. Crystal didn't show up again right away. My meals were now delivered by a middle-aged woman with a blank face and empty eyes. She wore a simple maid's uniform, came in, set down the tray, and left without a single word, without even looking at me, like a pre-programmed robot. The books and the tablet were gone too. Total isolation. Even her obsessive, unnerving presence had become a luxury I was denied. I felt like I'd been forgotten in this gilded corner of the world. Only the cold silver chain on my ankle and the silent, punctual maid reminded me that I was still alive, still a prisoner. Time ceased to have meaning. I spent most of my days sleeping or just lying there, watching the light crawl across the room, from the pale glow of dawn to the bright afternoon sun to the quiet dusk, until it was finally swallowed by a thick, suffocating darkness. My mind was empty. My heart was empty. I couldn't even feel humiliation or anger anymore, only a bone-deep numbness. Occasionally, I would remember Crystal's cold eyes as she broke the key, remember her words, "Who your master is," and that absolute, unquestionable power. Resist? How could I resist someone who could snap metal with her bare hands? Maybe she was right. Leaving here wouldn't be any better. I would just be trading one cage for another, possibly a worse one. At least here, I was fed and clothed. At least here, she needed me. The thought slithered in my nearly vacant mind like a venomous snake and coiled there to stay. I don't know how much time passed. A few days, maybe longer. Just when I felt like I was about to become a complete zombie, the door opened again. It was Crystal. She had changed into a soft, cream-colored loungewear set. The color had returned to her face, and the cold aura around her seemed to have subsided, making her look much more peaceful. She was carrying a bowl of steaming soup. She walked to the bed. I was lying on my side, facing the wall, and didn't turn around. She sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't try to touch me, just placed the soup bowl on the nightstand. "Sit up and have some soup," she said. Her voice was calm, emotionless, as if our violent confrontation had never happened. I didn't move. "You haven't eaten properly in days," she continued, her voice tinged with something that almost sounded like frustration. "You're going to make yourself sick." Make myself sick? Wouldn't that be convenient for her? A weaker prisoner is easier to control. I remained silent. There was a pause. Then I heard a very faint sigh. "Ethan," her voice was a little softer now. "I was very disappointed that day." My heart winced. "I gave you space to move. I gave you books and entertainment. I even tolerated your little games," she said slowly, as if she were analyzing the situation for both of us. "I thought you would slowly get used to it, that you would understand what I'm trying to do. But all you could think about was escaping." Her voice held a strange, almost imperceptible note of hurt. The thought was so absurd it shocked me. This soup, her topic shifted abruptly. "I spent a long time making it." She tapped a finger lightly against the bowl. "It's the kind you used to, seem to like." Used to? That used again. Who was she seeing when she looked at me? The idiotic Ethan from the book? Or some ghost from her imagination? A wave of irrational anger washed over me. "I'm not him," I snapped, whipping around to face her for the first time, my voice painfully hoarse. "Look at me, Crystal. I'm not the Ethan you think you know." I didn't know why I said it. Was it because I couldn't stand being a stand-in anymore? Or was it just a final, desperate outburst? Crystal froze. She stared at me, a flash of shock in her eyes, which quickly morphed into something incredibly complex. There was curiosity, dawning realization, and something else. Something deeper I couldn't decipher. She was silent for a long time, so long I thought she wouldn't answer. "I know," she finally said. Her voice was quiet, but it hit me like a thunderclap. I know. What did she know? That I wasn't the original? How is that possible? From a moment you gave me that pathetic little slap and started worrying about the carpet, she said, her eyes sharp as a scalpel, as if dissecting my very soul. I knew. You weren't him anymore. My mind went completely blank. She knew all along, from the very beginning. So all her patience, her observations, her taming, it was all directed at me, the soul from another world. A terrifying feeling of being completely exposed, of having nowhere to hide, consumed me. Then why? Why are you still doing this? Why lock me up? Because she leaned in close, her dark eyes reflecting my own terrified face. This you is far more interesting. Scared, pathetic, but with a harmless sort of cleverness and a little bit of kindness. Like a blank canvas that I can paint with any color I choose. Her fingertips traced my outline in the air, her expression one of fascinated, fanatical obsession. And most importantly, this you is one of a kind, a creation that is completely, utterly mine. My blood ran cold. I felt like I was encased in ice. So that was it. She hadn't imprisoned me because I was Ethan Hayes. She'd imprisoned me because I was me. A chance discovery, a new toy that suited her tastes, something she could mold however she wanted. That was so much more terrifying, so much more disgusting than just being a replacement. You're a monster, a psycho. I stammered, my teeth chattering. She didn't seem to mind the insult. In fact, she smiled faintly. Maybe, she said. She straightened up, picked up the bowl of soup again, and held a spoonful to my lips. Her voice was impossibly gentle. But for now, drink your soup. I made it myself. Don't let it go to waste. I looked at the spoonful of creamy liquid, at her calm, dangerously insane eyes, and I knew I had no choice. Resistance was futile. Escape was impossible. I was an ant in the palm of her hand. She could crush me whenever she wanted. A deep, profound sense of powerlessness, a swamp of despair, began to swallow me whole. I closed my eyes, and trembling, I opened my mouth. The warm soup slid down my throat. It tasted rich and savory, but I couldn't taste a thing. It was as if I were swallowing what was left of my dignity, my hope. Crystal watched me obediently drink the soup, a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. She fed me, spoonful by patient spoonful, and I, like a puppet with its strings cut, passively accepted it all. That bowl of soup felt like a turning point. By drinking it, it was as if I had agreed to some unspoken, humiliating contract. I stopped resisting Crystal's presence, stopped refusing the food and clothes she brought. When she tried to talk to me, I would even give short, numb answers. It's a nice day. What did you think of the ending of this book? It was fine. My reactions were as bland as a glass of water, incapable of making a single ripple. Crystal didn't seem to mind my coldness. She still came every day, sometimes just sitting in silence, sometimes bringing trivial news from the outside world, like a new fashion line or some pointless party. It was like she was cultivating a twisted domestic routine for just the two of us. And I was like a robot with its core programming removed, functioning on autopilot. But deep down, beneath the rubble of my broken spirit, something else was forming. After the fear and despair had settled, something colder, harder, was quietly taking shape. Hatred. It wasn't the panicked, confused anger from before. It was a clear, calm hatred that churned like a dark river in the pit of my soul. I hated her for taking my freedom, for treating me like an object, for her condescending, all-powerful attitude. And most of all, I hated her for seeing my most pathetic weaknesses and finding them entertaining. Her words, I know, had shattered my last self-deceiving illusions. She knew I wasn't the original Ethan. She knew my fear, my struggles. All my clumsy attempts at defiance were transparent to her. This feeling of being completely exposed, of being metaphorically naked under her gaze, was worse than the physical confinement. If I couldn't escape, and resistance was useless, then, at the very least, I could make sure she didn't enjoy it so much. The thought grew like a poisonous mushroom in the dark. I started watching her again, not for a way out, but for a weakness, for a way to hurt her. She liked me to be obedient. I would act like a soulless doll, denying her the satisfaction of a successful taming. She liked me in white. I couldn't refuse to wear the clothes, but I would deliberately let them get slightly wrinkled or get a tiny, insignificant smudge on them, ruining the purity she wanted. She tried to talk to me. I would use the shortest, most dismissive words, or just stay silent and let her talk to herself. I became a block of ice, silently resisting the warm water she was trying to melt me with. Crystal obviously noticed the change. The satisfaction in her eyes was gradually replaced by a subtle, growing frustration. One day, she brought a new, white cashmere scarf, saying it was getting colder outside. She wrapped it around my neck herself, her movements gentle. "Do you like it?" she asked, a hint of anticipation in her eyes. I felt the soft, warm cashmere. It was incredibly nice, but I just looked down and said flatly, "The color is too light. It'll get dirty easily." Her hands paused, her fingers tightening slightly on the scarf. The room was silent for a few seconds. I could feel her cold gaze on the top of my head. But in the end, she said nothing. She just finished tying the scarf neatly, took a step back, and studied me. "It suits you," she said, her voice a little cooler than before. She stopped trying to correct me with words or actions. We were locked in a strange stalemate. She still controlled everything, my food, my clothes, my life. But with my silence, my numbness, my passive resistance, I had carved out a small, frozen territory in her impenetrable domain, a territory that refused to thaw. And it seemed to be making her uncomfortable. She started spending longer periods of time in the room, sometimes just sitting and watching me, her expression unreadable. The pastries she brought became more elaborate, more varied, as if trying to test my real preferences. She even started playing music from classical to soft instrumentals, trying to break the stagnant silence. But I remained unmoved, a program doll, giving only the bare minimum response. I knew it was childish. I knew it was powerless. It couldn't change the fact that I was her prisoner. But it was the last pathetic act of defiance I had left before I completely shattered. I had to let her know that even if she owned my body, she didn't completely own my will. That night, I had another nightmare. Not about the system, not about the book's ending, but about Crystal. I dreamed she was breaking the key with her bare hands, dreamed of her cold eyes, dreamed she was smiling as she wrapped the silver chain around my neck, pulling it tighter, tighter. I woke up with a start, drenched in sweat. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of a night light. I was gasping for breath, my heart pounding. I instinctively reached for my neck, making sure there was no chain there. Just then, I heard the door click open softly. I whipped my head around and saw Crystal's silhouette in the doorway. She seemed to have just gotten back, carrying the chill of the night air with her. She walked to the bed and looked down at me. In the darkness, her eyes seemed to glow. "Another nightmare?" she asked quietly, her voice unreadable. I didn't answer, just watch her warily. She sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't try to comfort me like last time, just quietly observed my panic state. After a long moment, she spoke, her voice startlingly clear in the dead of night. "Ethan, what is it that you actually want from me?" Her voice held a rare, almost lost-sounding exhaustion. I froze. What did I want from her? To set me free? That was obviously not an option. So what else was there? I looked at her shadowed form, and the cold hatred in my heart mixed with something else, something I couldn't name, and churned inside me. I opened my mouth and heard my own voice, hoarse and steady, say, word by word, "I want you to know what it feels like, to have no control." The words hung in the air, and the room fell into a deathly silence. Crystal didn't speak. In the darkness, I couldn't see her expression. I could only feel the air around her instantly drop to a freezing temperature. My words were a stone dropped into a deep, still pond, shattering the false peace we had maintained for so long. After speaking, I didn't wait for a response, nor did I feel fear. I just lay back down, turned my back to her, and burrowed into the blankets, shutting out the world, including the sudden, glacial chill radiating from her. To have no control? As if she could ever understand. The silence stretched on. I could feel her stare, a physical weight on my back, so sharp it felt like it could pierce through me. But in the end, she did nothing. No angry words, no cold punishment, not even a single rebuttal. I heard her stand up, her footsteps heavier than usual as they moved towards the door. The door closed. The lock turned, but the sound seemed to have a new, strained quality to it. For the next few days, Crystal didn't come. The silent, maid continued to deliver my meals. But the atmosphere in the room grew heavier, thick with the low pressure that comes before a storm. I maintained my numb exterior, but my mind was in turmoil. My words had been a double-edged sword. In striking at her, I had also reopened my own wounds. The hatred was real, but what lay beneath it? Was it some twisted form of Stockholm Syndrome, born from this sick codependency? Or was it a pathetic sort of pity for the rare moments of exhaustion and confusion she let slip? No, impossible. I violently shook the ridiculous thoughts away, focusing on maintaining my cold, fragile defense. On the third night, the door opened. But it wasn't a meal tray that entered. It was the heavy scent of alcohol. Crystal stumbled in. She was clearly drunk. Her steps were unsteady, her face flushed an unnatural red. Her usually sharp, clear eyes were glazed over, unfocused. She walked directly to the bed and stopped, looking down at me. I sat up warily, leaning against the headboard, keeping my distance. The strong smell of liquor was making me nauseous. "Ethan," she mumbled my name, her voice thick and slurred. She didn't come closer. She just stood there, swaying slightly, her gaze a confused, struggling mess. Why? She seemed to be asking me, and herself, why won't you just listen? Am I not good to you? She staggered forward a step, catching herself on the bedpost. I give you the best. I protect you. I keep you with me. Why do you always want to leave? Looking at her like this, I felt my heart clench, a feeling I immediately suppressed with a fresh wave of suspicion. Was this a trick? Or is she actually this vulnerable? Isn't it nice here with me? She got a little closer, the smell of alcohol and her cold perfume overwhelming my senses. She reached out a hand, as if to touch my face, but it fell limply to her side. What's so great? About the outside, her eyes drifted vaguely towards the dark window, her voice trembling slightly. It's all fake. Everyone will just hurt you. Only I am real. Her words were broken and disjointed, but the desperate obsession behind them was terrifyingly clear. You're drunk, I said, my voice dry, turning my head to avoid her gaze. Drunk? She let out a low, hollow laugh. Yeah, I'm drunk. Only when I'm drunk. Do I have the courage to ask you? She snapped her head up, her hazy eyes suddenly sharpening, locking onto me. Tell me, Ethan, what do I have to do to make you want to stay? Her voice was raw, desperate, on the verge of breaking. I looked at her red-rimmed eyes, at her trembling body, at this raw, broken vulnerability she had revealed after stripping away all her defenses. The cold, hateful words I had prepared rose in my throat, but I couldn't say them. Faced with this version of her, all my petty acts of resistance seemed pathetic and meaningless. We stared at each other in the dim, alcohol-scented room. Suddenly, as if all her strength had abandoned her, her body went limp, and she pitched forward. I reacted on instinct, reaching out and catching her. Her full weight fell against me. Her head rested limply on my shoulder, her warm, boozy breath ghosting across my neck. She was heavy and fragile. I held her stiffly, not knowing what to do with my hands. The silver chain rattled softly with the movement. She seemed to find a comfortable spot nestled against me, shifted slightly with a soft sigh, and then went still, her breathing evening out into the slow rhythm of sleep. She fell asleep. In my arms? In the arms of her prisoner? In the very cage she had built? I looked down at her face, so close to mine, without her usual coldness and power. Her features were soft, unguarded, almost innocent. The thought sent a shiver through me. No, don't get soft. This is an act, a manipulation. I tried to push her away, but she was clinging to me like a drowning person to a piece of driftwood. And looking at her sleeping face, so completely defenseless, I found. I couldn't bring myself to do it. So I just sat there, stiffly holding her, feeling the warmth and weight of her body, listening to the sound of her breathing. Time slipped by. The darkness outside seemed to be thinning, a faint hint of gray appearing on the horizon. Crystal stirred in my arms, her eyelids fluttering open. Her eyes were hazy at first, then sharpened with startling speed. She saw me, saw our position, and her whole body went rigid. She immediately pulled away, scrambling back, a fleeting, almost panicked look on her face before her usual icy mask slammed back into place. She stood up, smoothed her wrinkled clothes, and looked at me with an unreadable expression, part scrutiny, part confusion, part something else I couldn't name. Neither of us spoke. The first ray of morning sun pierced through a gap in the curtains, casting a long, narrow beam of light across the expensive carpet. The edge of the light fell directly on the silver chain attached to my ankle, making it gleam. Her gaze followed mine, and she saw it too. She stared at the chain for a long, silent moment. Then, she raised a hand and pulled something from the pocket of her loungewear. It was the keychain. The broken half of the key was still on it. She held the keys, her fingers tightening, her knuckles turning white. Her gaze shifted from the keys to my face and back to the keys. The sun rose behind her, outlining her slender, powerful figure. I held my breath, my heart starting to pound uncontrollably. Was she going to open it? After a long, suffocating silence, she clenched her fist, closing her hand tightly around the keys. And then, without a word, she turned and left the room. The lock clicked. The sound echoed in the sunlit room. I stared at the closed door, at the silver chain glittering on my ankle, and then down at my lap, where the warmth of her body and the faint scent of alcohol still seemed to linger. And in the cold, dead ruins of my heart, the unexpected sunlight and her hasty retreat had just stirred up a cloud of dust.